One, two, three.
A pleasant day, ladies and gents. I am Jovinave Cardinal, your reporter. Today's topic, feedback and error correction. So in the case of language learning, I really do believe in the classic saying that you learn from your mistakes. Making errors is a crucial part of our language learning journey. When students make errors, teachers are there to provide them with guidance so that they will be able to produce the correct target form. As providing feedback on students' oral and written performances will allow them to grow, will enhance their target language skills. And according to Brookhart 2008, that feedback can be powerful if done well. And effective feedback can provide the students the information that they need in order for them to understand and know where they are in their learning and what to do next. However, it's always tricky to know when and if to correct our students and how to go about it. So with this, let us ponder on the question, when and how should you correct your students? Every teacher will have different views on this one, probably have different ways of correcting your students. However, in this case, it's about finding out what both you and your students will feel comfortable with, and I will be sharing some of the best ideas and ways of how to go about it.
First, ask the students how they want to be corrected. Talk to your students about error correction and to find out from them how they like to be corrected.
This may sound simple and obvious, but it can be easily overlooked. Often, students have clear ideas how they would like you to correct them. So with large group, you may have to go with the majority, but with a small group, you can cater for individual needs. One way of giving your students a choice of how much they would like to be corrected in a particular class or activity is for them to make a paper traffic lights. And here's an example of the one I made. It's like we're going to integrate a little art making with our class. This is made out of illustration board, which is cut in squares and put in circles with the colors red, yellow, and green. But how does this technique work? So whenever you will have an activity in your class, your students can put on their table one of these cards to indicate whether or not they want correction. Red means don't correct me at all. Yellow means correct the things which are really important or the things that I should know. Green means correct as much as you can, please. So this, I think, is an effective way to give correction to our students, because as language teacher, it's crucial to remember that on one hand, there is danger in overcorrecting our students. While on the other hand, it is not also right to let the activity flow without you giving any correction at all. Thus, correction of errors is sometimes appropriate. However, there are times when it is not.
Next is to recognize whether you're working on accuracy or fluency. Before you begin an activity, bear in mind whether you're concentrating on accuracy or fluency.
For a class discussion, for example, fluency would be appropriate, because the important thing here is that students are expressing themselves and are thinking on their feet. However, if students haven't time to prepare a role play and are going to perform it, you may want to encourage accuracy. So the thing that you need to remember here as teacher is to be clear of the aims of the task that you are providing your students, because with this you are able to recognize whether or not it is appropriate to give correction. Moreover, it is important for you to make sure that students are aware of what you expect from them. Don't present an activity as a fluency task, then pick them up every single mistake.
Self-correction or peer correction. The first port of call when correcting can be the students themselves. Students can often correct themselves when they realize they made a mistake. Students can also correct one another.
Sometimes, students' error is just a slip and they are aware of the correct version. So the thing that you need to do here is to give them a chance and time to correct themselves. Often just by raising your eyebrows or repeating the mistakes, students are able to backtrack and correct themselves. Other teachers may even create all sorts of hand signals to indicate the error, just like pointing behind you is a classic way of indicating that a student should have used the past tense. So if this works for you and your students, go ahead and create your own hand signals or correction indicators. Students can correct one another. So peer correction can help to create a positive classroom atmosphere where the students realize that you, the teacher, are not the only source of error correction and that they can learn a lot from one another.
Correction slots. One way to focus on students' mistakes is to take time out of an activity and look at mistakes as a group.
Whenever students are doing a speaking test or brainstorming in pairs or in group as teacher, the thing that you need to do here is to monitor them and to listen to what they are saying. Make a note of the mistake that you hear, whether it is pronunciation, grammatical, or lexical. Make selection of errors and stop the activity. Next is to write the selection of mistakes on the board and ask your student to analyze and correct these errors themselves. So as what we have discussed in the previous idea, the students are capable of correcting themselves. So with this activity, you are allowing an efficient, easy, and effective way of doing the task, self-correction.
On-the-spot correction. Correcting mistakes the second they are made has the advantage they don't have to bring the activity to a stop, as in the case with a correction slot.
There are students who don't want to be corrected, but most students are open to correction and often appreciate instant correction as it provides them the basis for improvement. But first, you need to bear in mind what kind of activity that you are providing your students before deciding whether or not it is appropriate to give correction. You don't want to ruin the flow of the class by butting in. Students can also be responsible for an on-the-spot correction by encouraging them to pick up on each other's mistakes. Moreover, on-the-spot correction is effective as it allows you to give correction at a bare moment while sustaining the flow of the class activity.
New mistakes or the same old ones. New mistakes are usually a sign that they are exploring new uses of language or experimenting with new vocabulary, but if they are always repeating the same mistakes, it's not such a good sign.
Mistakes and errors may sound negative, but as language teachers, it's crucial to keep the language learning experience positive for learners. If your students are always making new mistakes using the English language, always remind them that it's fine, that it's okay, that it's a crucial part of their language learning journey. Another way of dealing with this is for learners to have a set of space in their notebook where the teachers can write their error, correction, and the teacher's note. So by noting the students' errors, they can have a record of their progress and can avoid repeating the same mistakes over and over again.
Here's an example of how to note your students' errors. Divide the page into 3 columns where you can write the student's mistake, the correction, and your note. Mistake: I've lived in Barcelona since 6 years. Correction: I've lived in Barcelona for 6 years. Note: since is for points in time and for is for periods. Oral and written feedback.
The next part of this discussion are the common types of feedback that students receive in the classroom, both oral and written form. As language teachers, it's important to gain understanding of the different strategies of oral and written feedback, as this will provide an effective and productive language teaching and learning.
Oral feedback.
When discussing oral feedback in the classroom, any kind of dialogue that provides information that will help students in their learning can be included. So as early as in 1975, Sinclair and Coulthard discovered that the speaking patterns in the classroom were highly structured and have distinctive functions. They developed a model which consisted of teaching exchanges called initiation, response, and feedback. So this is a typical exchange and interaction that takes place in a classroom where the teacher initiates a conversation which resulted in a student to respond, and then the student will be provided with feedback. Oral feedback is therefore a natural part of the interaction in the classroom between the teacher and the student with his fellow students. So there are 2 types of oral feedback.
Positive feedback, praise.
Positive feedback is important, as when providing oral feedback, which consists of positive comments such as good, okay, yes, and well done. So this does not only validate a correct response, but it provides support to the learner and fortifies motivation for learning sustainability. So this type of feedback is also referred to as praise by scholars. So praise can be defined as an act which attributes credit to another for characteristics, attribute, skill, etc., which is positively valued by the person providing feedback.
Corrective feedback.
When students make mistakes, teachers are there to provide them with corrective feedback. So corrective feedback is simply the teacher's response to error. So this type of oral feedback can be provided either implicitly or explicitly. So when the teacher provides feedback in an implicit way, he or she corrects error by repeating the error or by asking clarification. The explicit way, on the other hand, refers to the teacher telling the student that the produced sentence is wrong and providing a reason for this. Moreover, corrective feedback can further be categorized into recast, metalinguistic feedback, elicitation, repetition, paralinguistic signals, and clarification requests.
Recast makes a complete reformation of learners' ill-formed utterance and provide relevant information which is obligatory but is either missing or is wrongly used in the learner's utterance. It falls into the implicit category.
Here's an illustrated example where the teacher provides feedback in the form of recast.
Student, would I go to school yesterday? Teacher, you went to school yesterday? Student, yes, I went to school yesterday.
So in here, the teacher reformulates parts of the student's utterance minus the error. Moreover, according to some researchers, that recast cannot lead to self-correction as the teacher already provides the correct form. Conversely, other researchers have concluded that recast is effective in developing language learning as it does not disrupt the flow of communication, which can be important in the classroom setting.
Metalinguistic feedback. This provides metalinguistic information or comments about an error uttered by the learner, and it falls into the explicit category.
So giving metalinguistic feedback entails providing comments, information, or a question relevant to the student's utterance as illustrated in here.
Student, she speaks 2 languages. Teacher, use the third person singular. Student, she speaks 2 languages.
It's clear that it is an example of an explicit corrective feedback where the teacher provided a metalinguistic information which increases the student's understanding of the correct target form.
Elicitation. Elicitation is another form of corrective feedback and is used directly to elicit the correct form from the student.
Here's an example which illustrates elicitation.
Student, when I went to Australia, I met a girl whose name is Amy. Teacher, I met a girl. Student, whose name is Amy.
The teacher paused to let the student fill in the blank to elicit the correct form or even reformulate the student's utterance. So elicitation involves prompting learners to correct themselves, which in return can result to a more efficient language learning.
Repetition. As another form of corrective feedback, repetition involves the repetition of a student's erroneous utterance to highlight the error.
And here's an example.
Student, I wake up early this morning. Teacher, you wake up early this morning? Student, I woke up early this morning.
In most cases, teachers adjust their intonation so as to make emphasis or to highlight the error. This gives the students a chance and time to think and correct themselves.
Paralinguistic signal. Paralinguistic signal is a nonverbal form of corrective feedback used to elicit the correct form from the learner.
Here's an example of using paralinguistic signals in a classroom setting.
Student, yesterday I go to the library. Then the teacher gestures with hands to indicate the past.
This form of corrective feedback uses signals such as facial expression or hand signals to indicate the error. So similar to what was used by the teacher in the example, it is to show that the student has made an error.
Clarification requests. Clarification requests are used when the teacher wants to indicate that a message has not been understood or the student's utterance contains some kind of error and that a repetition or reformulation is required.
As in the following.
Student, I get job. Teacher, pardon?
So in here, the teacher basically requests for clarification because the message of the student has not been understood. So in some cases, the teacher uses phrases or question like, "Excuse me?" or "I don't understand" to stress the fact that the student has made an error.
The second type of feedback is written feedback.
In contrast to the oral feedback, which is the natural part of a classroom setting and happens naturally, written feedback is considered to be optional. It provides feedback on students' written work. So this type of feedback is usually not immediate because the teacher has the time to think what or how to give feedback. So it could be a feedback relevant to the content or organization of writing, as well as the grammar and vocabulary.
Advantages and disadvantages of written feedback.
The most important questions that researchers have dealt with is the issue on effectiveness of written feedback, as some researchers believe that correcting students' essay does not lead to better results, that grammar correction is not necessary since it is harmful and ineffective. However, many other researchers believe the contrary. Feedback informs, regulates, strengthens, sustains, and eliminates the errors in the language learning. Thus, written feedback can enhance the learning by helping the students to
First, notice their errors in their written work. Second, engage in hypothesis testing in a systematic way. And third, monitor the accuracy of their writing by tapping into their existing explicit grammatical knowledge. Direct and indirect feedback.
There are different strategies of feedback provided in written work, and most researchers divide written feedback into direct and indirect feedback.
Direct feedback means that a teacher provides the students with a correct form of their errors or mistakes and involves crossing out a word, phrase, or morpheme and providing the correct form. Direct feedback also clearly states what is wrong and how it should be written, which means that the students themselves don't have to identify the error and how it should be corrected. Indirect feedback in written form includes underlining or circling an error. This method gives students the opportunity to identify and correct the error. Indirect feedback can further be divided into coded indirect feedback and uncoded indirect feedback. In coded indirect feedback, the errors are underlined and the teacher writes a symbol above the error in order to help the students determine what that error is. In uncoded indirect feedback, the teacher underlines and circles the error and does not write the correct answer or a symbol to indicate the error.
Both direct and indirect feedback are commonly practiced by writing teachers to effectively correct their students.
Focused and unfocused feedback.
Written feedback can be focused and unfocused.
Focused feedback refers to a feedback that is provided on specific and pre-selected mistakes. This could mean that a teacher focuses on pre-selected errors displaying incorrect usage of preposition, for instance. The unfocused feedback, on the other hand, refers to the range of mistakes. The teacher corrects different types of mistakes such as tense, vocabulary, spelling, and pronoun mistakes without clear distinction. Written comments.
Positive comment or praise can also be provided in writing. However, this type of praise is not only a comment such as "well done," but instead it is a particular comment that can make a difference in a student's language learning. For instance, the content, vocabulary, grammar is good is an example of praise that can be provided in students' written work. Criticism is a type of written comment which can be provided in students' written work. This includes a comment, "poor grammar," for instance. However, constructive criticism can also be an option. Teachers shouldn't provide vague and unclear comments as for learners to avoid confusions. Thus, they need to develop systemized and consistent form of written feedback. Again, mistakes and error may sound negative, yet whichever way you go by providing correction of error, try to keep the language learning experience positive for learners. As you are listening out for your students' errors, make sure that you also listen out for the good uses of language, to acknowledge the correct response, and to highlight these to the class, as well as overcorrecting can destroy the flow and the progress of the class and can even demotivate the students from expressing oneself using the English language. While on the other hand, in a class without feedback or error correction, the language teaching and learning can be very ineffective and unproductive. Thus, always remember to keep things in moderation, especially in the case of providing feedback and error correction. Once again, this is Joe Cardinal saying cast out the vice of hate and spread the virtue of love. Thank you.